Hello and welcome everyone to our AWD Knowledge Hub monthly webinar. I'm Hannah Ryu and it's a pleasure to have you all here. Today we have two very special guests, coaches Grace and Candice, who will share their insights in artistic swimming and inclusion with us. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. I'm a member of the Youth and Junior USA Artistic Swimming national teams, a certified coach, and I'm really passionate about advocating for diversity and inclusion within artistic swimming. Here is a quick agenda of what you can expect in today's discussion. Now I'd like to welcome our guest speakers, Coach Grace and Coach Candice. Coach Grace holds a master's in critical disability studies and brings over 14 years of experience in accessibility, advocacy, and inclusive practices. They are a certified Comp Dev coach and currently leads Ignites athletes with unique abilities and mixed ability programs. Coach Grace also serves on the Ontario Adapted Artistic Swimming Committee and co-created Navigating Neurodiversity in Sport, a coach education initiative supporting neurodivergent athletes. Coach Candice is an alternative learning classroom resource teacher in Welland, Ontario, with over 7 years of experience coaching Special Olympic speed swimmers with the Burlington chapter. She's developed accessible recreation programs for neurodiverse youth ages 4 to 12 and has been involved with Ignite Artistic Swimming for 22 years as both an athlete and a coach. Her coaching spans all levels from recreational to national, and she's deeply passionate about expanding access to artistic swimming in her community. I also wanted to introduce Ignite, formerly Burlington Synchro, which is a club that has been developing champions for life for over 50 years. So Coach Candice and Coach Grace, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourselves and share a brief introduction to the Ignite Club as well?
Hi everyone. So my name's Grace. Thank you for the introductions. So with Ignite Artistic Swimming Club, we were formerly known as Burlington Synchro. When we changed to artistic swimming, we switched over to Ignite Artistic Swimming. So we took the opportunity to change our name and kind of do a rebrand. So the programming that we offer, we have recreational programs, regional league, competitive, which includes high performance and provincial level, and then we have master's programming, and our AWD program is called Athletes with Unique Abilities. So we say AUA, so that's just within our club. Within our province, we just say adapted athletes, but if you hear us saying AUA or adapted, it means the same thing to us. But that's just a little snapshot of our club.
Thank you so much. That was a perfect way to set the stage, and without further ado, I will now pass it over to the both of you to present the material you've prepared.
So Candice and I have a 3-hour workshop that we do with, we have one that's for artistic swimming specifically, but then we also have a multi-sport one. We've also adapted it to be for our judges and our referees within our sport. And so this tonight is kind of like a little snapshot of what we have within that training, and it's kind of like our key highlights that we wanted to bring forward and share with everyone. So one of the main things that we want to talk about is what is neurodiversity. We always start our workshops with this question, and usually we ask the participants what they think of when they hear the word neurodiversity, and a lot of the time it's a lot of the same answers. So everyone usually associates it with ADHD or autism. Those are our biggest answers when we ask that question. But what we want to share is how diverse the neurodiversity community is. So you can see on the left, there's that neurodivergent umbrella. So there's so many different parts of neurodiversity that are included in this umbrella, and within that image, that's not even an exhaustive list. So there are more that aren't on that list. And then we also wanted to discuss some of the terminology. So if you hear us saying neurodivergent, that's a person whose brain differs or diverges from the statistical norm. Neurotypical is a person whose brain does not differ from the statistical norm. So you'll hear us use those words. And then another thing we wanted to mention is neurodivergent is a term used to describe those whose neurological function is outside of the norm. So common neurodivergence include ADHD, like I mentioned, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, but there are so many others that we want everyone to be aware of. And then in fact, 1 in 8 people are considered to be neurodiverse, but fewer than 50% know it. So even though diagnosis rates are on the rise, many neurodivergent people have developed coping mechanisms to support themselves and still require additional support in areas such as school, community involvement, and sport. So even if someone doesn't have a diagnosis, that doesn't mean that they're not neurodivergent. And that's why we want to create inclusive programs where everyone can thrive and really do their best. And we don't discriminate against anyone because someone might not have a diagnosis but still need those supports that we can offer within our sport.
All right, so when talking about coaching behavior, physical limitations, or cognitive differentiations, there's a lot of information and kind of can feel a little bit overwhelming. So I like to think of it as an iceberg model. I know we've all seen 1,000 iceberg models and it never ends, but I think when coaching athletes in general, it's important to see what's under the surface. So what we'll commonly see is the limitation or the behavior that's kind of stopping the athlete from achieving their goals. But what we don't see underneath is all the causes. Things like they might be hungry that day, or they could be not able to do the skill because of physical limitation, or maybe they just don't have the cognitive processes to complete that movement yet. So we're going to talk about some common causes that we might see in behavior, physical limitation, and cognitive differentiation, as well as some strategies you can use with all of your athletes, whether they are in your AWD programming or just in a regular team. So starting with behavior, some causes of a behavior you might see such as hitting, biting, spitting, refusing, bartering, basically any behavior, any action that you can see. So this could be due to a non-desired activity, loss of control, it's a difficult task, fear of the unknown, trouble processing the information, trouble communicating their wants and their needs, and also triggers. It's important also when it comes to behavior that it's important to understand that if the child could do what they could do, then they would. So there's something that's blocking them, and it's for us to understand what is blocking them to take away that barrier. So whether it's fear of doing a task or if it's trouble processing, and we're going to use strategies to take away that barrier. So things like providing a choice or offering a first then statement. So first we're going to do our somersaults, then we're going to do our back layout. That might just help the athlete structure things a little bit better in their brain so that they can sort out what's coming next. You can also share the schedule or have a visual schedule to help the athletes. You can explain the situation. We're not able to use music right now. It's not our time. But after this, we'll be able to use it. You can give and take when needed. So sometimes it's not really worth arguing with an athlete, whether it's time to do a skill now in practice setting or at a competition when things are really important. So remember that it's a give and take balance. You can try explaining it in different language to see if that helps. You can offer closed answered questions, give them yes or no. You can also give time and change activities and come back to it. So those are some kind of ideas that can help you in dealing with behavior. Each situation is different. Each child is different. It's going to take some time to get to know your athletes and what they need, but really taking the time and getting to know what's stopping them and how you can support them is really going to be an advantage to you. When dealing with physical limitations, it could be caused by a medical condition or an injury. It could be muscle tightness and length. It could be trouble with spatial processing, loss of a limb, processing difficulties. These are all some causes that could be for a physical limitation. There are many others as well. Some strategies you could do is provide modifications. So maybe if you're doing a drill, provide 3 drills that everyone can do with modifications for each drill, seeing how each athlete responds. Focus on a specific area for success. So maybe your athlete really struggles with flexibility. Maybe that's something that you want to focus on, or maybe you want to focus on something else that's not related to the flexibility to give the athlete a sense of success. Create an individualized plan or flexibility plan for that athlete based on their needs. And you can physically manipulate the athlete to help understand the movements. So for example, if you're doing a fishtail on the wall, you would help them by maybe holding their leg and showing them how to lift it. You can get peer demonstrators to come and help. You can create an individualized program for that athlete, provide alternative programming. So if each athlete is doing something individualized, maybe this athlete could do something else. Make sure that you give lots of time, provide written sequences. So athletes who struggle with physical processing might need to see everything laid out. So what is the figure? How do you draw it out? What is each count supposed to be? And then also teaching sequences progressively. So if you're learning to do a porpoise lift, for example, you're not going to start with the vertical. You're going to start with the front layout and then build your way up to the hardest skill. And lastly, our last section, cognitive differentiation. So this could be due to a cognitive difference, age, or a change in the environment. So we all know that our athletes change from practice to competition. Sometimes they'll have a completely different behavior when they're at a competition. So it's important to make sure that we're keeping track of those things and that we're implementing the right strategies at the right time. So you're going to set boundaries and enforce them. So if you're saying we're going to give 5 minutes for something, you need to enforce that boundary. Teaching listening techniques. I know a lot of teachers will say, things like all hands on top, that means stop. These are really good for our younger athletes, as well as athletes with cognitive differences. This helps them have a set response for each call and response or each thing that we're asking them to do. Plan time for their needs. Sometimes athletes really need to do something, and it's important that we're providing that time for them, especially if they have an individualized plan or practice programming. Give time for processing. Sometimes it might take a couple of minutes for the information to sink in. It's important that we give that time. Provide written sequences or drawings or visuals, and then teach sequences progressively.
Another topic is problem solving. So a lot of the time when we're coaching athletes with unique abilities or disabilities, we have to problem solve on the spot, whether that's they're having a behavior that we've never seen before. We're always trying to think on our toes if situations arise. So ways that in our club we try to alleviate some of that problem solving at practice is trying to set up our coaches for success. So one of the things that we do is we create athlete profiles, and this can look very different. So our programming that's for like high performance athletes, our programming that is for our provincial stream athletes, they have a different athlete profile. This is just the one that we've taken that base and we've developed it specifically for our athletes with disabilities. So this is an example that we created for this presentation. So we always have a picture of the athlete. This is because if we have like a substitute coach and they've never coached this athlete before, then we need to give them the athlete profile. They need to know who it is, and then we just always have that picture and their pronouns there, and then their name. So we put things that they're working on so that the coach who is not familiar with them would know what they're working on and what their goals are for the season, and then they know they can focus on them. We also have their level and their category. That's just because if they're a certain category, their figures might be different than other categories. So if they're regional league, their figures might be different than if they are competitive, and then their figures would be different depending on their level. And then we also have their age. I like to put the age in there as a coach just so that we realize that some of our athletes are like in their 20s and we need to speak to them like they're in their 20s and not like they're younger, even if they present differently. So that's why I always put the age in there so that the coach is aware of the age of the athlete. Things I need help with. So examples here are staying on task, making friends or connections. We always add their strengths in. That is because if the coach is having like an issue and they want to switch around the practice plan, maybe they're going to focus on the strengths for a bit to give that athlete a boost or to make them feel really good about their skills. So let's focus on our strengths for a bit if we're trying a new skill and they're getting frustrated. Another section we have is the main supports or coaching strategies. This, for myself, is probably the most important section that I really focus on, and that's because the coaches who've been working with this athlete have developed these strategies. They know this athlete, they know what works best for them. And so if I'm coaching them, I want to know how best to help them as well. So an example of this, Candice takes time to learn complex figures. If she does not understand the sequence right away, give her time. This may take a couple practices. So we put that in there so that the coaches know, like, maybe they won't get that done in that one practice, and that's okay. So that's the main strategy that we use for her. And then the learning style. So whether that's physical or verbal, and it just depends on what that athlete likes. So if it's verbal, then when I'm coaching Candice and she's learning a new skill, I want to say all of my feedback verbally. Maybe it's tactile and she needs her body moved. Maybe she's a visual learner and she would do better with pictures or videos of someone else doing the skill first. So we want to know their learning style as well. And then their learning preference. So do they like to be on their own? Do they prefer that one-on-one attention? Do they prefer learning in groups? We have some athletes who thrive in the group environment. They copy what the other athletes are doing and they want to do it as well. Whereas when it comes to that solitary one-on-one, they don't thrive as much. They don't like the attention as much. So what is their learning preference? How do we support that learning preference within the practice? We also put things that they like and things that they don't like. This being like if that coach wants to create that connection with that athlete or create that conversation, maybe it's like, oh, well, Candice, I know you like singing and dancing. Like, who's your favorite singer? Or what's a dance that you like to do? That creates that connection. And then things that they don't like. And that's there, not so that they avoid it. You can see that the thing that Candice doesn't like is going upside down. She doesn't like doing somersaults. And we're not going to completely avoid doing somersaults because Candice needs to learn how to do somersaults. But that coach needs to know that Candice doesn't like somersaults, so she may push back when that's part of the practice plan. Or she may get frustrated during that time of the practice. Or maybe there's a way that this coach can explain somersaults where it's a different vibe and it's a different scenario, and Candice does like somersaults because it's a different situation. We also put areas of need. So that could be technical areas of need. So that could be like her egg beater, but then that could also be like areas of need, like maybe she needs help in social situations, being comfortable with other people or new people. So that could be whatever pertains to that athlete and is specific to that athlete. And then struggles, triggers, and behaviors. This may not be an exhaustive list. There's like some of our athletes we've known for like 8 years now, but there's still new triggers that we find, or there's new behaviors that we find. The behaviors might change as they age. They might change depending on what's going on at home, what's going on at school. The triggers may change because maybe we just haven't been presented with that situation until now, and then now it's a new trigger that we're learning about. So with the triggers and struggles and behaviors, that could also be changing and developing. And then we have an additional notes section if there's anything that the coach would need to know. We would just add that in there. And so with these athlete profiles, if we've never met the athlete before, we send out athlete questionnaires. So if that's, that could be like at the beginning of the season, we'll send out the athlete questionnaire to the parents to fill out. And that's where we get most of this information if we've never met the athlete before. If we're doing a tri-synchro lesson and we've never met them before, we send out that athlete questionnaire just so that we have a base of who is this athlete, what strategies do they use at home, what strategies do they use at school, what can we use in the pool. And then throughout the season, we try to add to this and develop it. And it's not just for like substitute coaches who are coming in to coach that athlete, it's also for us to keep track as well, right? So I can look back at our athlete profiles from like 8 or 9 years ago and see what our athletes were like, and then I can look at them now and see how they've changed and developed. Some of our athletes, their athlete profiles don't change a whole lot, and they'll stay the same for many years. Some of them will change every year, or it feels like they change every month, that they like new things or don't like new things. But we try to have this snapshot for our coaches who have never worked with them, our coaches who routinely work with them and are coaching them every week, and then if anyone else ever needed that information. Some of our athletes, in addition to athlete questionnaires, they'll submit a letter, and it just talks about what they did over the summer and what they're into now and how they're doing. So some parents prefer to share the information in that medium, and that's totally fine as well. But that's how we do it. We get the athlete questionnaire, we create the athlete profile, we try to update it throughout the season if possible. And that's just a tool that we use so that if we're in a situation that's new or that is tricky for us, it's like, okay, here's how we're going to problem solve. We're going to look at what their learning style is, because maybe they're having the issue because we're not using the right learning style. We're going to look at what their learning preference is because we're trying to problem solve why they're not doing this one skill. Maybe it's because they want a buddy to do it with. So that's how we problem solve. We use this tool. And then this can also build an inclusive and cooperative environment. So when we use these tools and we have all of this information and we build this athlete profile, it's also building that inclusive environment for our athletes, because then we can just have all of these strategies already there for them, already ready to go. All of our coaches are already aware of everything they need to be aware of when coaching those athletes. So even if they're not coaching them, maybe they need that help, and there's like a coach who just steps in quickly and helps them. So that also builds that cooperative environment where coaches are helping each other. All of our coaches are comfortable stepping in and helping out with those athletes if we are struggling that day in any environment. And then this also stresses the importance of knowing your athletes. So not just knowing them from an athlete perspective, like a technical perspective, but also like knowing what they enjoy and what they don't like, so that you're building those connections and they want to keep coming back, not just to swim, but also because it creates that family and that community for them within our sport. And then sometimes to get this information, we do have to have uncomfortable conversations, and that might be like, can you please explain a trigger, like why this trigger came about at practice? And that can be uncomfortable for some coaches to ask. So we try to create that positive and inclusive environment, and we're very open about everything with the families. So we tell them a little update at the end of every practice, like, oh, this is how it went, and we create that connection with the families, and then we hope that that would lessen the uncomfortable conversations, because then you have that connection with them. But we have had to have some uncomfortable conversations where we're like, can you please explain this, or we noticed this, is there something going on at home? And just having that support system there can help you with those uncomfortable conversations. But that's the tool that we use. We find it really, really helpful. You will notice that there's no diagnosis on this athlete profile. We are a firm believer that we don't need a diagnosis in order to have someone participate in our sport. So we need the tools or the strategies to help them, but we don't necessarily need to know that they have a certain diagnosis. So we don't ask for a diagnosis unless it's necessary. Most parents share it anyway. Like they'll say, oh, this is their diagnosis, because they're so used to sharing that, but we don't ask for it unless we absolutely need it. But most families do share it anyway, but that is not on the form, because even if they did share that, if I'm sharing this with another coach, they don't need to know, oh, this is their diagnosis. They just need to know these strategies to help them. And I'm sure like there would be outliers where they do need that diagnosis, but in terms of athlete profiles and problem solving, it's not a piece of the puzzle that we need at this point in coaching. But we would need it for other areas.
Another thing that we can do is utilize our resources with our athletes. So things like visual supports are really key in helping our athletes, any athlete. So when building resources and utilizing visual supports, it's important to have clear expectations. So what is this visual support for, and why are we using it? And then we need to model how to properly use the visual support, as well as the behaviors and expectations that we have for that visual support. Consistency is going to be also really important. So if you're using a timer, or you're, looking at a figure breakdown, that you're consistent every single time, it's always the same. You're acknowledging the positive efforts of the athlete while using the visual support, and you're evaluating the effectiveness and the success of the visual support, and then restarting if you need to. So I'll give some examples. So for example, a timer. So this clock here. You can use a pace clock. You can use anything that you need. So for example, okay, after we do our somersaults, we're going to do our back layouts. But you have 2 minutes to do whatever you like. So you're using that timer as your boundary. You've communicated how much time it is and what the expectation is. You can say things like, when you're having your 2 minutes, you need to stay between this black line and this black line, and you need to make sure that you are close to the wall. And then you're modeling that positive behavior. You're reinforcing, oh, you're too far, come back. Things like that. You're being consistent every single time. You give the same amount of time. You're utilizing that timer. If when it rings, then you're starting again and you're saying, okay, we're moving on. If you see that the second time that you use the timer, it's not really effective, the athlete is not listening to the cue or is not really using it, maybe it's time to look at a different kind of visual support or another reinforcer, such as maybe a token chart, or using a tool or a toy to help motivate that athlete. So I'm just going to go over the types of visual supports that you can have. There's lots. This is not an exhaustive list. So you can have a visual schedule as seen with the flutterboard here. This athlete is using a PEC system, which is just a single picture that they can add and take off. You can make it like on a whiteboard. You can be written. It doesn't always have to be pictures. It's just sequencing things out. You can use a first then chart. First we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. You can use a token board with stars, or you can use really get into athletes' interests. So I've used many things. I've used layouts, I've used positions, I've used games, I've used TV shows, you name it. Anything works for a reward system as long as you have a personal connection to it. This person here we've called Synchro Susie, or Artistic Andy, is a little figurine that can move back and forth to help show different positions and how the body would move to do a transition or a position. This I find really helps athletes who need to physically see what it looks like when you don't have any but access to anybody else, like a peer, to help them. You can use timers. You can use also social stories. We have athletes who have triggers with things like alarms. We can't control alarms at the pool, so maybe using a social story in that situation to explain what's going to happen if there is an alarm, what are the steps, where are we going to meet, where are the safe locations, how are your parents going to be involved, and really creating that plan to help reassure athletes. And everyone can benefit from these tools. I coach 10 under for a really long time, as well as 11, 12, and I find myself using these resources on the daily, regardless of the ability of my athletes.
And then for best practices, I divided it into 3 different topics that we wanted to discuss going forward. So for navigating neurodiversity, we wanted to chat about having clear expectations, being consistent, and then having a standard skill list with progressions, so that can help know where to go when you're coaching. So okay, we're going to work on this, and then next practice, this is the progression. So our progressions, it depends on the athlete. Sometimes it could take like 6 weeks to go through a progression. Sometimes it could take 6 months. So either way, we still have that standard skill list, and we go through all of the progressions. And then we also keep track of who's where in their progression, because all of our athletes are different. So then another thing we wanted to talk about was growing your program. So we have worked really hard to grow our Athletes with Unique Abilities program and our mixed ability programming. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that I've done to grow our programming. So the first thing I always do is community outreach. So for us, that looks like I'll email different community groups, see if they can share some info about our programming. With that, it's like I'll just Google the email address or the phone number of a different community group. So that could be like the Special Olympic swim team in Burlington. That could be the cerebral palsy group on Facebook. A lot of the parents within our club are connected within those communities. So I'll also reach out to the parents and be like, hey, what community group are you in? Can you send me a contact? I want to reach out to them and I want to recruit for our club. Most of our recruitment is actually through word of mouth. So even though I do reach out to the community and I share about our program, our highest success has been from our families sharing with their friends. So a lot of our athletes are friends within our program, and at school as well, because they know each other from school. So word of mouth and asking the families to share with their community groups and their friends has really helped grow our program. We host tri-synchro lessons. It's just an hour lesson where they come and they try synchro, see if they like it. Sometimes that's a little tricky just based on ratios. So we don't want a really big ratio of our AUA athletes with our coaches. So we would need a lot of coaches for that time if we want to have a really big tri-synchro event. So sometimes ratios can affect our tri-synchro events and how many people can actually register. We've also tried bring a friend lessons, so they can bring a friend who's interested in trying it. They can try it at practice, and that doesn't have to be another friend who's part of the adapted program. That could be a friend who would be in the mixed ability program. So it could be anyone, but those are different strategies that we've tried to grow our program. And then for equity, diversity, and inclusion at your club, that's also part of the workshop that Candice and I do. We talk a lot about EDI in the sport and how you can actually apply it and how we can utilize it and make an impact. So we wanted to mention that inclusivity is an ongoing process. So even if you have lots of boys in your club, or even if you have lots of adapted athletes, it's still an ongoing process. So inclusivity and diversity is always ongoing. We're always working towards it and we're always focusing on it. It's not one of those things where you get your check mark because you've reached a goal. It's one of those things where you want to set a new goal and reevaluate it consistently. So increasing diversity within our clubs, that's something we're trying to do. We're trying to recruit boys into our sport. We're trying to grow our adapted programming even more, grow our mixed ability programming, and with increasing our diversity, we can do that. And then we also want to set short and long-term goals. That's really helped us with our EDI practices within our club. So an example of a short-term goal that we had was awareness and education. So we wanted to look at all of our stakeholders, so not just our coaches, but the families, the athletes, our board. We have an executive within our club, so we want to bring that awareness and that education to all of our stakeholders, and then within that find our role going forward. So we're trying to put it in our strategic plan and link it to that strat plan, and really figure out where we're going with our EDI practices and how we can bring all stakeholders in. And then for a long-term goal, we want to be active within that EDI world and within the practices of EDI. So that's like taking meaningful action in support of others. So we're not just putting it in our strategic plan and saying that it's there. We're trying to take meaningful action. We're trying to recruit our adapted athletes, but then also create that environment where they'll thrive. We're trying to bring more boys into our sport, but then keep up those numbers. So just looking at your short-term and your long-term goals for any of your EDI practices and how you can make an impact and not just achieve the goal, but truly make an impact for those people who are in your club. And then this is our Instagram. So we've been trying to grow it. I took a little bit of a break working on our Instagram. So some of the posts are a little older, but we've been really trying to grow it. The whole point of us creating this workshop was to share our knowledge and connect coaches together and connect sports. And we have learned so much throughout this process about other sports. And so we're trying to grow our Instagram. So if you want, you can follow us. If you have any questions ever, or you want us to send you some resources, feel free to email me. That's my email address. Sometimes emails go to my junk because it's a funky email address. So I do try to check my junk regularly, but if you aren't able to reach us through email, feel free to message us on Instagram.
Thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information with us. I definitely learned so much, and I hope everyone was able to learn something new as well. Now I'd like to open the floor up for questions. If you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can also raise your hand or just unmute yourself. We did have one question come in the chat earlier. Someone asked what initially drew you to the AWD space and what keeps you motivated to stay involved?
I'll go first, or do you want to go first, Candice?
No, it doesn't matter, whatever works.
Okay, I'll go first. So my sister had a chromosomal disorder, so I always knew that I wanted to work with people with disabilities. And professionally, I'm in abilities management within human resources, so it kind of merged from this interest at a very young age to now this is my professional career, and then it's just crossed over into sport as well. And then what keeps me motivated to stay involved, I can see the impact that inclusivity and accessibility has made in sport. When I go to practices, when I go to competitions, I see the impact that it's made on our athletes, on our families, on our communities, and just continuing to make that impact is what motivates me to stay involved.
My experience is similar to Grace's. I started volunteering with Special Olympics and a neurodiverse camp at a very young age, and I've always been involved in sport. For me, I actually started with the AWD program a lot before. I started coaching, so I started volunteering and then I started coaching, and it was a natural progression for me. And then when I went to school, I knew I wanted to teach in alternative learning classroom, so kind of followed into my professional life as well. Same as Grace, I really find the advancement in our sport, specifically in AWD, amazing, and our parents love it and our community is loving it, but I find there's still a lot of work to do, and that motivates me to help continue that progress. It's important for me to see that everyone has the same rights as all athletes and that they're capable and people see them as capable. I have a lot of athletes that I've worked with who have been infantilized in their home clubs, and it's important that we treat them and respect them like we do all athletes. And that's something that we need to work on in our sport.
Yes, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring backstories with us. While we wait for some other questions, you shared a lot of really amazing coaching strategies with us, but I also wanted to ask a little bit about your personal experiences working with athletes with unique abilities. I was wondering, what are some of the most rewarding aspects of working directly with athletes with unique abilities?
For me, it's that moment when things finally click. So I've been working with an athlete for many years now. He refuses to go underwater. He doesn't really like being at the pool. Competitions are stressful for him. And recently, he started going underwater. He recently started doing somersaults. He's liking the pool more and more. Competitions are still a little bit stressful for him, but we see that progression. So not only has he mastered the skills that he was unable to do at the beginning, we've been working together and very hard for a long time, but now he's able to advance to the next progression. And just that little change or those little moments of success are what motivate me to keep going and help me provide the programming that's necessary for each athlete.
My answer is very similar to Candice's. We've both been coaching for many years, and I don't really remember the competitions. A lot of them blend together, but what I always remember is the little goals that we've achieved, and those little achievements, like the first time your athlete does a dive, or the first time your athlete accomplishes a skill that they've worked all season or multiple years on. So the competitions are amazing, and we have beautiful pictures from the competitions, and they're definitely a great goal. But as a coach, I also find it most rewarding to see those little achievements, and that's actually what I remember most from coaching, is those little goals.
Yeah, those all definitely sound like very rewarding experiences. We had one other question from the chat. They asked, what are some strategies you use to support athletes who may struggle due to a change in environment, for example, competition settings?
Yeah, so there's definitely lots of strategies you can do based off of the needs of your athletes. What I would start with is a social story, so explaining each step of the competition, what it's going to look like, and you can go very in detail. You can put pictures of the facility, you can include a schedule or times. to help the athlete. And then I would practice it. So, doing mock figure competitions or mock competitions at the pool, getting other people to cheer, maybe having parents come in and cheer, just to make them as comfortable as possible. We've even reached out to other clubs in the past as well to see if we can go to their pool and practice in their pool, just to practice the change of environment. Obviously, you're still going to have challenging moments within the competition, but you're just preparing the athlete the best that you can beforehand. During the competition, you're going to utilize the strategies that you've already taught. You're not going to teach new strategies. That's why it's important to practice first. So if you're going to be using breathing techniques, if you're going to be using, fidget toys, or you're going to be using that schedule or that social story to break things down, you're making sure that you've already taught it multiple times and that you're just reviewing the information. That way, the athlete is able to process it and actually utilize the skills. Something that was explained to me from a psychologist was, think of your brain as your hand. So you have like the core values of your brain, things that you, like your reptilian brain, things that you can control, that's just like your base functions. And then you have like the gray matter on top. So once you enter a fight or flight state, you flip your lid. You cannot focus, you cannot learn new skills, you're not able to focus, you're still in this zone here. So if you've practiced, you've taught everything, and everything's inside that brain, when their lid is flipped and they're not able to think, they're not able to process, they still have those strategies at the base and they're able to utilize them with some help, of course.
And then we also, if it's a new pool or a new environment, we try to give extra time. So, for example, at that competition setting, we'll have them arrive earlier so we can walk about the facility and get used to that environment before we actually get into coaching. And then another thing with the change in environment, aside from like the visual things that we talked about, was like for the competition setting, what we would do for our athletes is try to like find those pictures and videos, but then also think like if something doesn't happen, we're just trying to go with the flow. And maybe with that one competition, they walk on deck, and even if that's all they can accomplish and they don't actually swim their routine, they still made that progress. So even though as a coach we are under pressure for our athletes to perform, sometimes maybe their goal has to shift mid-competition, and that has happened to us and our athletes previously, where we've prepared our athletes so much, we did everything that we thought was right, but then ultimately they didn't want to swim. They got on deck, they did the warm-up, but then when it came to actually performing, they weren't able to. And while it is disappointing because they worked really hard and we worked really hard, we had to accept that they did as much as they could that day, and they did still achieve something. They still got on deck, they still did their warm-up. So just trying to adjust if you need to in the moment.
Thank you so much for your responses. We have one more question in the chat. There are a set of questions. They ask, in Canada, inclusion seems on the way, but we're still very far in France. They're asking some more specific questions.
Some policy question. I think I try to. We are very far in France, and I would like to know how do you do that in Canada? I'm very impressed with the level of Canada. Very good, and wow. For you, we don't have that in France, and I would like to know to help and to understand, and to maybe one day the same in France. One day, maybe I would like.
Yeah, I'm just reading through your questions in the chat. We're not like employed by the government. It's like there's Canada Artistic Swimming, and then from Canada Artistic Swimming, it's all of our provinces. So we are affiliated with Ontario Artistic Swimming, and that's our governing body. And then within Ontario, we have all of our different clubs. So Candice and I are employed by our club. We are paid to coach by our club. But then if our club ever had any issues or needs resources or supports, we have Ontario Artistic Swimming, that governing body. that we would reach out to, and they're the ones who like organize everything for our sport in Ontario. And then all of the provinces also have Canada Artistic Swimming. That's their governing body as well. So if we go to provincial meets, we're with Ontario Artistic Swimming, and if we go to national meets, so if we fly out to a different province, it's under Canada Artistic Swimming. So that's how it's divided here. But basically, each province has their own rule book. So for your question about who decided to give this place to athletes, so each province has their own rule book, and they have their own rules. In Ontario, with our Adapted Artistic Swimming Committee, we've tried to change the rules and add new events, like we added mixed ability, and then we give all of our resources to Canada Artistic Swimming, and then they make their decisions of what they want the sport to be like in Canada. So it's kind of it's a group discussion for a lot of things. Like, we're trying to connect everyone and really make changes through those connections and those discussions. But I think part of it is also, I wouldn't say it's political necessarily, but like societal based. I think there is a big part of society. Like when I swam as an athlete, like growing up, I don't think there were any athletes with unique abilities or disabilities. They were more like in like a recreation space. And then now we have athletes who compete nationally or internationally within the space. So I think part of that could be considered a societal change. But yeah, that's how it is in Canada.
Yeah, it's very good. And in the US, it is the same, Anna, or not? For you, in your competition, you have athlete in the US, I think.
Yeah. We also do have a separate category for athletes with disabilities.
Because when I'm a doctor. I am doctor. So when I heard Grace and Candice, I have the impression to hear some nurse in France. You do some nurse with some patient at the hospital to help to find something to help, visual or some pictures. The nurse as the same. In France, it is like a nurse. You understand me? And
yeah, I understand.
We don't have that. We don't have that at the pool. Yeah, it's very good. It's very interesting. I would like to have that, but it's very interesting.
It is different.
Yeah, because I work with autistic children, and the nurse as the same way with a picture or some to find what is the best for the child and the adolescent, like the same way as you did, and it's very interesting to see that. Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things. I saw a question, seems to have disappeared on my screen, talking about classification. So Canada does have classification. It's divided into two groups, C and P, so cognitive and physical. And then as well, within those categories, there are 6 levels. So in it, everything is a progression. So the level 1, athletes in both categories swim the same figures, unless there is a physical modification that needs to be done on the figure in the P category or in the C category. I wanted to touch base as well. I just was helping with provincial team this year. So Team Ontario competed in Alberta, and things were very different there. So from province to province, the level of, the level of care put into the adapted programs is very different. So when we're looking at Ontario has a very strong program and is kind of making headway within Canada. And then other provinces are kind of following their lead. So if you're really interested in looking in any rule books to help guide, I would suggest looking at Ontario's because they are the leader.
I have read it. Yeah, Ontario is very good. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. It's true, and do you work with doctors and nurses for the children? Maybe.
We don't. I get most of my resources from school in the educational sector. So in my class, I work with children who have autism, who have Down syndrome, who have a lot of abnormalities, and I pull most of my information from there and my resources, and then I apply it to a swimming context. So things like visual schedules, things like timers, those are all things that I've taken from my professional world and brought it into synchro, and that has helped me a lot. The only time we'd really work with doctors or nurses is if we had athletes with physical needs that needed that support. So if they needed a G-tube, or if they needed a nurse on deck to help, or if they needed, support with a lift getting in and out of the pool, that's when we would really work with them. But otherwise, not typically. Or if we have guest speakers come in to talk about mental health or talk about nutrition, that's when we would ask them to come in. But typically, no, we don't typically work with medical professionals.
Okay. And maybe they are very happy to know what you do with the girls, and maybe the boys. Do you have boys and girls? Maybe, yeah, you are. Yeah, very good.
How many boys are we at, Grace? I think we're close to
in our
5.
Our adapted athletes, we have last season we had 23 adapted athletes, and I think 6 of them were boys. I think.
And do you have more cognitive or more physical disabilities, or it is the same?
We have more cognitive athletes than physical. We're trying to grow in all areas, but we have mostly cognitive in our club.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, this is Meredith Simpson from the USA. I'm involved in the our overall AWD committee for the USA Artistic Swimming, and I just wanted to say that our stuff is very similar to Canada, but we do have more cognitive athletes also, and we are like them. We have the physical and the cognitive athletes, and then we have what we call levels for figures that the coaches decide what their ability is to do, and they are able to do it through that way. So just so you know, and we keep it consistent throughout the United States because we're one organization, unlike the separate provinces that you have. So, but it's very similar.
Thank you so much for your responses. Last question, the chat, they're asking if there are any deaf athletes in your program.
Not in our club specifically, but other Ontario clubs do have athletes within, and they would be considered physical category.
Thank you so much for all the questions and the responses, and thank you again for sharing the powerful strategies and insights with us. And we'll definitely all be cheering for you and your team as you continue your amazing journey to spread awareness. Our next webinar will be on August 29th at 9 a.m. PST. Our guest speakers will be coaches Sandra and Noemi from France, and I'll be sending out the registration and meeting links soon, so stay tuned for those. Thank you so much, everyone, again for joining us today, and a special thank you again to coaches Candice and Grace for sharing all their expertise and experiences, and I hope to see everyone again next month. Thank you so much.